To start your week, special report starts right now. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Brett Baer. The message from the two presidential campaigns tonight: trust no one. It's been a weekend of damage and spin control after the leaking of potentially damaging information about both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. We have Fox team coverage tonight. Mike Emanuel with the Hillary Clinton campaign, which is dealing with that leaked audio. But we begin with senior national correspondent John Roberts outside Trump Tower tonight in New York on Donald Trump's tax returns. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. Donald Trump spent much of the day preparing for next Sunday's debate in St. Louis, and campaign insiders say he will be ready for his next face-off with Hillary Clinton. One of the issues that he'll likely have to grapple with, though, new questions raised about the unauthorized release of his partial tax returns from the year 1995. The New York Times reports that in 1995, Donald Trump declared a loss of nearly $1 billion from the collapse of his casino empire, the Trump Shuttle, an ill-fated purchase of the Plaza Hotel. Without any proof he did, the Times went on to say Trump could have used that loss to avoid paying any taxes for 18 years. Trump surrogates were today dispatched to fight back, praising his business acumen.
There's no one who's shown more genius in their way to maneuver around the tax code and to rightfully use the laws to do that.
This is part of our tax code. The man's a genius. He knows how to operate the tax code for the benefit of the people he serves.
The explanation mirrored what Mitt Romney said about taxes in 2012.
I pay all the taxes that are legally required and not a dollar more.
But the Clinton campaign portrayed it as the sort of bombshell Romney warned was lurking in Trump's tax returns.
It shows the colossal scale of his business failures in the 1990s, which I'm sure probably hit a nerve with him, is probably something that he's still ashamed of to this day.
He crashes businesses into bankruptcy, leaving scores of businesses unpaid, people really hurting with the losses his companies have suffered. But he walks away unscathed.
The Trump campaign did not dispute the facts of the report, but said the returns were illegally obtained and threatened legal action. The campaign insists Trump has paid hundreds of millions of dollars in property taxes, sales and excise taxes, real estate taxes, city taxes, state taxes, employee taxes, and federal taxes.
This is actually a very, very good story for Donald Trump. The New York Times does not have any information in that story that says Mr. Trump did not pay taxes. All they did was quote the law, which says if you have that kind of loss, that you can use that kind of loss to offset income for 18 years.
The release of the tax returns appeared to derail Trump's rally in Manheim, Pennsylvania last night. Trump went way off script, at one point mocking Clinton's September 11th fainting spell and threatening to bring up Bill Clinton's infidelities at the next debate, suggesting she may have been unfaithful to him.
I don't even think she's loyal to Bill. You want to know the truth. And really, folks, really, why should she be, right?
Plenty of Republicans, including Newt Gingrich, are warning Trump against talking about Bill Clinton's infidelities during the next debate, fearing that they could lose women voters en masse. On the income tax front, Democrats over the next week will no doubt ratchet up the pressure for Trump to release some more recent returns. Pressure Trump insists he is determined to resist. Brett?
John Roberts outside Trump Tower. John, thank you. The Clinton team is trying to walk back, or at least massage, the nominee's private comments about Bernie Sanders supporters, who happen to be mainly a lot of young voters she's eagerly trying to court. Senior political correspondent Mike Emanuel is following that story tonight from Akron, Ohio. Good evening, Mike.
Brett, good evening. Donald Trump tonight says Bernie Sanders should pull his endorsement of Hillary Clinton. Trump says Clinton deceived Sanders and then attacked him and his supporters.
There is a sense of disappointment among young people about politics. They're children of the Great Recession, and they are living in their parents' basement. And the idea that maybe, just maybe, you could be part of a political revolution is pretty appealing.
Today, Clinton's campaign manager was asked to explain the hacked audio from Clinton's conversation with donors back in February.
She was talking about young people that she'd met who were frustrated that they graduated from college and went into an economy where they couldn't find the job they wanted.
Her current opponent, Donald Trump, pounced, tweeting, "Crooked H is nasty to Sanders supporters behind closed doors. Owned by Wall Street and politicians, HRC is not with you." Her former rival, Senator Bernie Sanders, blamed college affordability and not Clinton.
What she was saying there is absolutely correct. And that is, you got millions of young people, many of whom took out loans in order to go to college, hoping to go out and get decent paying, good jobs. And you know what? They're unable to do that.
But when confronted by many of his supporters holding back from embracing Clinton, Sanders did not push.
We live in a tough world. This country faces enormous crises, as we do as a planet. And I would like people simply, I'm not going to tell people how to vote.
In addition to trying to win over Sanders supporters and millennials, Clinton is also trying to firm up backing in the African-American community. Clinton visited a predominantly African-American church in Charlotte.
We do know this family and this community is in pain.
Following the recent Keith Lamont Scott shooting in Charlotte, Clinton reiterated a call for better policing and pledged much more.
We have to take a broad approach. We've got to look at education and jobs and housing and transportation and how we best do that and how we bring everybody, to the table.
Breaking this hour, we've got basketball superstar LeBron James of the Cleveland Cavaliers endorsing Hillary Clinton for president. That may help her here in the Buckeye State. Clinton is set to return here to Ohio tomorrow after not being here for the past month or so. There have been reports suggesting Clinton is ready to write off the Buckeye State, but her aides insist that is not the case. Brett?
Mike, thanks. Obviously, on election night, we'll be very interested about the balance of power in Congress, and specifically in the Senate, because it really does hang in the balance this election. Here you see a map where all of the Senate candidates that are running this cycle are up. The blue and the red are states where one U.S. Senate candidate is up. The gray does not have a Senate race this cycle. You can see the breakdown here, but let's look bigger picture here. This is the majority, 54 Republicans to 46 Democrats. It's actually 45 Democrats with one independent who caucuses with the Democrats, but this is the majority. It takes 51 for the majority, or 50 plus 1, and we'll explain that in a second. As of tonight, this is the average of polls in these races. Even if it's a razor-thin margin, if the election were held today, this is how these races would break down. Democrats, as of tonight, would pick up Wisconsin. Ron Johnson would lose there. Illinois, Mark Kirk would go down. Evan Bayh in Indiana would pick up the Indiana Senate race, as well as Pennsylvania as of tonight. Pat Toomey, the incumbent, would lose there. And even in North Carolina, as of tonight, the average of polls has Richard Burr, the incumbent, going down. Now, for the Republican side, you have a pickup tonight in Nevada, and the rest are a hold. You have New Hampshire holding for Kelly Ayotte, Florida holding for Marco Rubio, and obviously John McCain, a big winner in Arizona. The rest of these states, as of tonight, stay exactly the same. Look at these numbers. 50-50, tie. So whoever wins the presidency then is the tiebreaker. If Hillary Clinton wins, Vice President Kaine becomes the tie-breaking vote, and Democrats take the majority of the U.S. Senate. If Donald Trump wins, Vice President Pence is the tiebreaker, and Republicans win. That is how much the U.S. Senate hangs in the balance and how close it is. Now, on the House side, it's a different picture. 247 to 188. Most polls will tell you that's very, very slim chance that Republicans lose the majority. They may lose some seats according to the polls, but not many, and it's likely that House Speaker Paul Ryan will be the Speaker of the House November 9th. There are many interesting races across the country with interesting people. One of the most interesting House races is in California, where the son of a political icon is going up against a new face in the Republican Party, running an interesting race in California. Chief Correspondent Jonathan Hunt lays it all out for us from Salinas.
Scratch the surface of California's heavily agricultural 20th congressional district, an area that's voted overwhelmingly Democratic in the past, and a fascinating political race is shaping up.
I'm not supporting Donald Trump.
A Republican candidate in Casey Lucius who has not been shy about disavowing the top of the Republican ticket, and a Democrat with a famous name.
You know my politics, you know my platform, you know my family.
Jimmy Panetta is the son of Leon Panetta, former congressman, former White House chief of staff, former CIA director, former Secretary of Defense.
I am proud of my last name. I am proud of the service.
I was taught that service isn't a choice. it's an expectation.
Panetta served in Afghanistan as an intelligence officer with the Navy Reserve and is currently a deputy district attorney in Monterey County, focusing on violent gangs.
I haven't been handed anything. I've worked hard, and I want to work hard for you.
His Republican opponent is Casey Lucius, a Navy veteran and professor of national security at the Naval Postgraduate School. She's well aware she faces an uphill battle in terms of name recognition.
Obviously, it's difficult, but it does speak to the establishment politics, which is exactly what people are tired of this year.
You have said very publicly you will not be voting for Donald Trump, the top of your own ticket. Why not?
We do rely on immigrant labor, and we need immigration reform. So his immigration policy would not work for the residents of my district. I disagree with his trade policies, and I just disagree with his foreign policy.
Both candidates acknowledge immigration may be the biggest single issue in this district, but Panetta argues he is more committed to comprehensive reform.
I don't just want to take it piecemeal. I want to make sure that we have people who are willing there to tackle that wholeheartedly, dealing with border security, dealing with the visa process, dealing with a pathway to citizenship, and making sure that we have people who are able to come out of the shadows.
You confident of victory in November?
Yes, we are confident.
I feel very good going into November.
There has been no reliable polling since the primary in June, in which, under California's rules, the top two vote-getters advanced to the general election regardless of party. In that primary vote, Jimmy Panetta beat Casey Lucius by some 50 points. Brett?
It's one of the races we'll follow. Jonathan, thank you. One quick correction. I said there was one independent who caucused with Democrats. Actually two, Angus King from Maine and Bernie Sanders from Vermont. Let's look, though, at the House, the balance of power in the House. Senior Capitol Hill producer Chad Pergram is with us tonight. Chad, what are the expectations for the balance of power? I touched on it there at the big board.
Well, certainly Democrats are going to win some seats in the House of Representatives. The question is how many. And one of the most interesting things about this election is that the Republicans have a very good firewall, which was put in after the 2010 census. Redistricting really worked in the Republicans' favor in 2010. And here you have the Democrats getting the nominee who they really want this year in Donald Trump, somebody who they ought to be able to really clean house with. And they are really not that close to winning control of the House of Representatives. They're going to pick up some seats. The question is, could there be a wave at the very end? We saw a wave in 2006 and 1994 when you had these big sea changes in the House of Representatives, 30-plus seats. That's exactly what they would need this time around. And House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi is saying, just wait.
Nobody thought we were going to win at this point in 2006, and it turned into a wave. It turned into a wave in 2010, much closer to the time. So it's like saying, do you see a wave? We're not even at the beach.
Now, the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, he knows that this is a jump ball going in here, and he said as much just a couple of days ago.
We've got knockdown, drag out. So sort of like a knife fight in a phone booth. New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, Illinois, Nevada, Indiana, Florida. We seem to have gotten some distance in Ohio, but everywhere else it could go either way.
The key here might be Republican incumbents who won in their primaries. That was not the case in 2010 and 2012, and so that's the kind of the firewall in the United States Senate this cycle for Republicans. They were able to get Marco Rubio, the senator who, of course, ran for president, to run. There was concern that he was going to not run. He said he was done with politics, and that might be the key at the end of the day. There's a lot more Republican seats on the field here compared to Democratic seats this cycle, and that's why Democrats are starting to get into some other races here in North Carolina and Missouri.
And quickly on the Senate, if it pans out like I did at the big board, 50-50, and it is really the presidential race that breaks the tie, you also have the possibility that someone in the middle in either party could switch, like we saw with Jim Jeffords in Vermont.
Right, Jim Jeffords.
The balance of power.
Absolutely. And going into the election, or right after the election in 2000, Trent Lott and Tom Daschle, who were the Republican and Democratic leaders that year, they forged an alliance, an agreement that came to pass in May of that year when Jim Jeffords switched parties. It started out with the Republicans in control. Jeffords switched parties, became an independent. He caucused with the Democrats, and that power-sharing agreement came into play, and Daschle was in the majority leader for about 6-7 months.
It'll be fascinating. Very quickly, what's still left on the table for Congress that possibly factors in here?
Right. A couple of things here. Merrick Garland. That was the big push by Democrats to try to move Merrick Garland through the Senate. That didn't work out. In fact, Democrats are going to try to make that a race for Chuck Grassley, who's up in a swing state in Iowa. He's the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, against Patty Judge. That has not been a factor whatsoever. And the other thing that was left on the table was a contempt of Congress citation for Brian Pagliano. He is the IT specialist, the former IT specialist at the State Department, who set up the personal server for Hillary Clinton. They will hold him in contempt probably in November, but Republicans really wanted to do that before the election, continuing to push these issues with Hillary Clinton that she's not trustworthy and begging the question, what really went on with that email server.
Yeah, and the immunity question is obviously how that was divvied out by the Department of Justice. Chad, as always, thank you for the weekly update. Up next, we will compare and contrast the tax policies as we know them of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. WSVN in Miami, where more Zika-carrying mosquitoes have been captured in another Miami Beach neighborhood. The Florida Agriculture Department says it is the 6th time infected mosquitoes have been found in that region, but it's the first time in the last 2 weeks. Fox 32 in Chicago, where at least 36 people have been shot in another violent weekend there. At least 2 people have died so far. A 17-year-old girl shot in the head early Saturday morning, and a 35-year-old man was killed in another neighborhood about a half an hour later. That makes at least 527 homicides in Chicago so far this year. It's early October. This is a live look at New York from our affiliate Fox 5. One of the big stories there tonight, a U.S. official telling the Associated Press federal rail officials found dozens of violations in New Jersey's transit system months before Thursday's commuter train crash into that Hoboken station. One woman was on the platform and she was killed by debris, more than 100 people injured. Federal data indicates New Jersey transit trains have been involved in more than 150 accidents since the start of 2011. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway. From Special Report. We'll be right back. One of the areas in which Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump differ the most is taxes. Correspondent Kristen Fisher is here tonight to break that down for us. Good evening, Kristen.
Hey, Brett. Well, in the midst of this most unconventional campaign season, this is one issue where both Trump and Clinton have produced plans that are very much in line with traditional Republican and Democratic values. Trump wants to cut taxes, and Clinton wants to raise them. If you're in the top income bracket, Trump would cut your tax rate to 33%. That's down from its current level of 39.6%. And that is identical to the tax plan put forward by House Speaker Paul Ryan. But under Clinton's plan, if you make more than $1 million a year, you'd be subjected to a minimum 30% tax rate. And if you make more than $5 million a year, you'd also be hit with a 4% fair share surcharge that would effectively create a new top tax bracket of 43.6%, while Trump would cut the current 7 tax brackets down to 3, 12, 25, and 33%. That would help anyone earning less than about $195,000 a year. As for Clinton, she said flat out that she will not raise taxes on the middle class, and she defines that as anyone making less than $250,000 a year. Now, if you run a business, Clinton wouldn't touch the corporate tax rate, which is currently at 35%, but look at this. Trump would cut it to 15%. Listen to how Trump and Clinton tried to spin this part of his plan during the first debate.
That's going to be a job creator like we haven't seen since Ronald Reagan. It's going to be a beautiful thing to watch. Companies will come, they will build, they will expand.
It would be the most extreme version, the biggest tax cuts for the top percent of the people in this country than we've ever had. I call it trumped up trickle down, because that's exactly what it would be.
So what kind of an impact would these two tax plans really have on our economy? Well, experts say Clinton's plan would increase federal revenues by about $1.1 trillion over the next 10 years. As for Trump, his latest plan has yet to be scored, but he insists it would reduce the deficit by $2.6 trillion over the same time period. And Brett, these tax plans could very well be one of the hottest topics at this next debate.
And we'll continue to do this compare and contrast on policies here Sunday.
I like it.
Kristen, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's get some insight now on the Trump tax controversy, the rest of the campaign news, and where this race stands tonight. Karl Rove is a Republican strategist, former senior advisor to President George W. Bush. He joins us from Austin, Texas. And Joe Trippi is a veteran Democratic strategist, has, of course, worked on several presidential campaigns. He's in Richmond, Virginia. Okay, guys, let's first put up the average of polls that we look at, the most recent polls. We've got the Fox average, if you will, and it has Hillary Clinton up just slightly in the average of polls, and you can see it right there on the screen. And then if you put up the electoral map as we have it, these are states that, as of the average tonight of the polls in these various states, Hillary Clinton has 263 to Donald Trump's 171, 104 toss-ups. This is, as of tonight, it can shift, it can change. 270 is what you need to win the presidency. Karl, your thoughts on the state of the race right now?
Well, it's been a bad week for Trump. He had a pretty good debate. The first 30 minutes, he did well. And then, since then, rather than talking about things that people care about, he's been focused on a former Miss Universe whose name came up in the debate. And for reasons that are beyond me, he's focused on her rather than the news that was available to him each and every day. Monday, the FBI came out and said 10.8% jump in murders over the last year. Tuesday, Director Comey is grilled over by Congress over his failure on the Clinton investigation. Wednesday, they announced 600 more troops going to Iraq, no status of forces agreement. Thursday, the GAO comes out and slams the administration over funding of Obamacare. And rather than talking about these kind of things, or on Friday, the release of the Bernie Sanders comments by Hillary Clinton, rather than talking about these, Donald Trump has been talking, tweeting, and shouting about a former Miss Universe. It's just beyond me.
Okay, Joe, how does the tax story play?
It depends on how. I don't know what they're doing. I agree with Karl that he had all this momentum. Then he went into the debate. I thought was doing well at the beginning of it, and then just sort of unraveled. And he's been unraveling ever since. And even the handling of the tax stuff, they're not getting in front of anything. And it looked like at his rally where he started going after Hillary for the pneumonia stuff and that she wasn't loyal to Bill. I mean, he's not even addressing it. He's sort of, throwing things out that I think have to really worry a lot of the Republicans, particularly those running in these tight Senate races, having to defend this stuff. So right now it's all going against him at this moment.
But let me ask you this, Joe. Do you think that you have a situation here where the Clinton team has to look at these numbers and say, this is not a guy that is running a traditional campaign. They're not, the numbers aren't moving a great deal, and this is still an anti-establishment, anti-elitist kind of atmosphere out there. Are they concerned that if they don't see the numbers move significantly in coming days, that they still have a fight on November 8th?
Well, look, they're going to have a fight on November 8th, but I think the Clinton side of this is whenever the focus is on one of them, whoever has the focus doesn't do very well. It was that she wasn't doing very well in those weeks prior to the debate. Then all of a sudden the focus has gone back to Trump. They want to keep it there, and they want to just keep throwing out bait and hoping he keeps going for it. I think we're going to see that for the next 30 days. I do think, though, that they also believe that they can get their early voting started, that they can get their vote out, and that's what they're concentrating on. And the longer Trump sort of is reacting badly and sort of pushing off, I don't think they're that worried at all. He keeps bringing attention to him. They keep getting out their vote. That's sort of the plan right now, and I think it's working for them.
In this environment, Karl, what is Mike Pence's mission come Tuesday for this debate?
Put the focus back on change. The argument ought to be, are you in favor of change with Trump-Pence, or are you in favor of status quo with Clinton-Kane? And this week, again, one of the most valuable, if not the most valuable asset a presidential candidate has at this point in the campaign is time. And we've chewed up here. We had 42 days the morning after the convention, after the debates, between that day and the election day. And Donald Trump has used 4 or 5 or 6 of those days, depending on how you look at it, as being largely or only connected to Miss Universe. And he has got to push the change dynamic. And my suspicion is that on Tuesday night we're going to see two people on the stage whom both of them are going to come off well, but I think Pence is going to hit hard the dynamic of, do you like where the country's going? Are you in favor of the direction that it's headed? If not, come with us. If you are comfortable with the way things are, go with the status quo of Clinton-Kane.
Okay, I want you, both of you, to go back to the electoral map real quick and pick out one state that you think is important for either campaign, and we'll put up the average of polls in that state. Carl, you're first.
Let's go with Florida.
Okay, let's put up the RCP average of Florida polls there. It has Clinton up 44.7 to 43.5.
This is critical because if Trump wins Florida, and I think he's got a good chance of winning it, then he can win the White House. If he loses Florida, in all likelihood, he's not going to win the contest because Democrats have taken 18 states and the District of Columbia and all 6 of the last presidential elections, all 6, 242 electoral votes in those states. If he wins Florida, then that kicks him. Then he's got a good start. If she wins Florida, she's at 271. If she wins those 6 those states that they've carried the last 6 times. So he got to win Florida. It could put him on the path to the White House. If not, very difficult to see a path that gets him.
Okay, Joe, your state?
North Carolina.
All right, let's put up the average in North Carolina. It is Trump 43.1 to Clinton 42.3.
This is a state that Barack Obama won in 2008 and then lost narrowly by a half a point in 2012. I think the Clinton campaign is going to throw everything but the kitchen sink at trying to pull this state out. If they do, particularly if Carl's right that Florida could tip to Trump, then North Carolina ends up slamming the door on him. If they get Florida and North Carolina, forget it, it's over. So I think they're going to throw everything at it, and I think getting out their vote, that's the concentration. They're going into that kind of an effort right now, and I still think Trump's and the GOP is woefully behind. It's better on the GOP, the Republican Party's gotten better, but the Trump campaign just doesn't have the apparatus in place, I don't think.
All right, gentlemen, as always, thank you very much. By the way, North Carolina, also an interesting Senate race there that could be the balance of power. As we just said, we are 2 days away from the only debate between the vice presidential candidates, Democratic Senator Tim Kaine and Republican Governor Mike Pence. Special Report will be on the road at Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia, starting tomorrow and then Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern. Then Megyn Kelly will join me 8:50 p.m. Debate night coverage Tuesday night. Last Monday's first top-of-the-ticket clash between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump has sparked a lot of complaints about media bias. Tonight, national correspondent William Lajeunesse looks at a new way to track exactly what's being reported about the debates.
Here's what we can do. We can deploy 500 million more solar panels. We can have enough clean energy to power every home.
Do you remember that part of the debate? Probably not, because that soundbite wasn't replayed over and over again.
We know that a lot of people learn not just from the show itself, but from how TV news reports it.
Well, that's no secret, but until now, no one quantified how that happens. For the first time, analysts measured exactly how many times the TV networks replayed the same soundbite in their post-debate coverage.
I will release my tax returns against my lawyer's wishes when she releases her 33,000 emails that have been deleted.
That was the most aired 10 seconds of the debate, according to the Internet Archive, followed by Clinton's response on stamina.
Well, as soon as he travels to 112 countries and negotiates a peace deal, he can talk to me about stamina.
Third, her counterpunch on preparation.
And you know what else I prepared for? I prepared to be president.
That played 11 times on 4 morning shows.
What we know from the political science research is that both the debate and more particularly the media coverage of the debate do have a small effect on voters' preferences. Not huge. You know, the largest effects we see sort of historically, about 2 to 3 points.
Example, in 2000, voters scored the first debate for Al Gore. But after the media hammered him for his exaggerated audible sighs and eye rolls, Bush gained in the polls. In 1976, voters didn't know what Gerald Ford said about the Soviets in Eastern Europe to be a gaffe until the media highlighted it. In 2004, a focus group watching the Kerry-Bush debate gave it to Kerry. A second group watching the post-debate commentary called it for Bush.
Not everybody has time to watch a full 90-minute debate. People will turn on the morning news and they'll see what their favorite newscaster said about something, and that'll be their takeaway.
So what got the least amount of coverage? The first 40 minutes where Trump talked about the economy and jobs and later bashed Clinton on NAFTA and TPP. Brett?
William, thank you. Still ahead, why critics of a statewide push to raise the minimum wage in Maine say it might backfire on the poor. But first, why you could get the feeling you're being watched when you vote in November.
You've got to go out and you've got to get your friends and you've got to get everybody you know and you got to watch your polling booths.
You may notice your polling place is a little more crowded this November than in years past. That's because there may be volunteers keeping their eye on you. Senior correspondent Eric Shawn is in New York tonight to tell us why. Hi, Eric.
Good evening, Brett. Well, there likely will be more than just election officials at your polling place watching, but an army recruited to look out for any possible wrongdoing.
Kathy Mayhall plans to keep an eagle eye on the vote.
We're going to poll watch, or as they say, poll observe.
The Ohio Donald Trump supporter has heeded the call from the Trump campaign to sign up as a poll watcher in Cleveland. The effort, the latest move by political parties and other groups to deploy volunteers to monitor the election.
You get to be inside the precinct election board, and you actually can, in Pennsylvania, you can keep track of everyone that comes in to vote. I mean, you can ask the board how many every hour, how many Republicans, how many Democrats, how many independents, keep a running track of it. You just watch what's going on.
In 46 states, private citizens can challenge voter qualifications, either on or before Election Day, except in Alabama, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Wyoming. In Ohio, groups like Trump's can observe but not challenge voters. The poll-watching group that has gained the most attention has been the Houston-based True the Vote. In 6 years, it says, thousands of poll watchers have been trained, saying they act properly. But critics have long charged that such citizen efforts can be too aggressive and lead to voter intimidation and suppression.
There's a significant risk of discriminatory conduct.
Wendy Weiser of the Brennan Center for Justice says poll watchers have repeatedly been shown to challenge voters based on race. She says in such a heated election as this one, officials should check voters, not private groups.
It is illegal for people to target voters on a discriminatory basis. It is illegal for people to behave in an intimidating way, and that includes directly confronting voters or using any threatening language or raising your voice. And it's illegal to disrupt the polling place or to otherwise try to purposefully interfere with eligible people participating.
But Kathy says she will do the right thing.
It's a way to just watch what's going on and make sure that everyone gets a chance to vote, regardless of who they're voting for, that their vote is their vote and it counts.
Well, True the Vote says its watchers are prohibited from talking directly to voters to prevent any possible problems. As for the Trump campaign, it did not respond to our request for information. And Kathy tells me she's still waiting for poll training information too, but also says she can't wait. Brett?
All right, a lot to cover on this topic. We'll see you next week. Eric, thanks.
Will do.
Voters in Maine have a big decision to make. Should they increase the minimum wage there? Critics say it could risk jobs when employers cut back. Supporters discount that. Correspondent Douglas Kennedy looks at the situation tonight from Portland, Maine.
My dad started his first restaurant in '54, not too far from here.
Steve DeMillo has been working in restaurants since he was 8 years old.
You handle pickles like nobody's business.
So the restaurant business really has a very slim margin of profit.
That it does. You know, we hope for most full-service restaurants hope for a 4 or 5% bottom line. It's a struggle. Some years we make it, some years we don't.
Exactly why he opposes a ballot measure in Maine that would raise the minimum wage for tipped workers to $12 an hour by 2024. DeMello says making a slim margin at his restaurant in Portland all but disappear. Currently, you have to pay your waiters and waitresses $3.75 an hour.
Correct.
So this is a huge expense.
It's a huge expense. By the time this ramps up to $12 an hour, it's enough that we're talking about changing the whole format of our restaurant.
Changing the whole format, he says, could mean eliminating tips and possibly even cutting out wait staff altogether.
7 states already have this policy in place where tipped workers make the same minimum wage as all other employees. Tipping is alive and well in those places, and the restaurant industries are doing great.
Will Eichhardt is from Maine Small Business, an advocacy group supporting the measure, which would also raise the minimum wage for all other workers from $7.50 to $12 an hour by 2020.
$7.50 an hour is about $300 a week. You can't live on that.
Supporters of the ballot measure say when workers make more money, they will spend more money in Maine's stores and restaurants, boosting Maine's economy. But it's a prediction not everyone is buying. Charles Hughes is from the Cato Institute and has studied the effect of minimum wage increases on the economy.
In the past, when the minimum wage has been increased, firms, in an attempt to absorb these higher labor costs, have held off on plans to expand. Some have had to close completely, and some have reduced the number of workers they're able to employ.
It's an argument Ali Moncow has heard before.
Working for $3.75 an hour is hard.
Ali works as a waitress in Portland, and she says when tips disappear in the off-season, she can't pay her bills.
As soon as summer dies off, you have fall and winter. How are you going to live off of $3.75 an hour?
So there are some workers who say in the off-season their tips are non-existent or very low, and they simply can't get by on the current minimum wage. What do you say to them?
I say the wait staff, probably in any restaurant in the state of Maine, is making well above minimum wage, and they take the good with the bad.
He says having no job will be much worse, which is exactly what he says will happen if Maine passes the hike. In Portland, Douglas Kennedy, Fox News.
Next up, the Trump tax headlines and the fallout, and Hillary Clinton's basement dweller comment about Bernie Sanders supporters. We'll talk about all of it and the rest of the campaign news when the panel joins me after a quick break.
Maybe he doesn't want the American people, all of you watching tonight, to know that he's paid nothing in federal taxes.
That makes me smart.
If he's paid zero, that means zero for troops, zero for vets, zero for schools or health.
Now, if not paying taxes makes him smart, what does that make all the rest of us?
First of all, we're talking about 26 years ago. Perfectly legal. We should get that straight immediately. This is a perfectly legal application of the tax code. And he would have been a fool not to take advantage of it.
What it shows is what an absolute mess the federal tax code is. And that's why Donald Trump is the person best positioned to fix it.
Well, this is the story that drove a lot of news today. The New York Times had this story, and we asked a question before about Donald Trump's tax returns in our Fox polls. Does the fact that Donald Trump has not released his tax returns bother you, or is it no big deal? Bothers me, 46%, no big deal, 52%. Today, Trump tweeting, "I know our complex tax laws better than anyone who's ever run for president, and I'm the only one who can fix them." Hashtag failing New York Times. Let's bring in our panel. Tucker Carlson, host of Fox and Friends Weekend. A.B. Stoddard, associate editor at Real Clear Politics. Tom Rogan, columnist for the National Review. And David Drucker, senior congressional correspondent for the Washington Examiner. Okay, David, how's it play?
Well, look, I think that when you're dealing with both of these candidates who are both very unpopular and have a lot of problems, any day that you're on defense, any day that you're not talking about your message and making your opponent explain all of their flaws and all of the challenges that they have, that's a losing day for you. And I think that coming out of the debate and coming out of the week that Donald Trump had, I don't think that this does him any favors. Now, does it cost him with his base? No. His base will never abandon him. But his challenge is to get from his base to just over the top and a little more than Clinton, and this does not help him get there.
Okay, we should point out this is from 1995. The New York Times says they got a manila envelope with the tax returns, Tucker, and that in there was a loss of more than $900 million that legally Trump could take as a loss and then not have to pay taxes.
Right, for 15 years forward and 3 years back. It's obviously not good for Trump. It doesn't look good. It comes at a bad time. But what exactly is he being accused of, if you think about it? Not paying more than he needed to in his federal taxes? That's a pretty high standard. Did Hillary pay more than the feds wanted her to pay last year? Did George Soros, did Tom Steyer? No. So, I mean, really what you're looking at, and I think Trump should say this, is a corrupt tax code. part of a rotten system, and the people benefiting from that system, all the lobbyists in my neighborhood have gotten really rich in the past 8 years, are 100% behind Hillary, as is every corporate chieftain in America. And so it could be sort of a perfect moment for Trump to say, as he said sort of inarticulately before, the system is rotten, I know, because I'm benefiting from it, and the people, other people benefiting from it, are supporting her. That should tell you everything.
Tom, what about that argument? You know, he puts out this picture, and he references it all the time, of the big stack of documents that he has to file, he says, with the IRS whenever he files taxes. Is that a compelling argument for him to make in the wake of this story that many people say is just negative and doesn't play well?
I think David is right in the sense that he doesn't have to worry about his base. They're on his side. We're near the end here. The people who would have qualms about Trump would have had those qualms a while ago and are not coming back. But to Tucker's point, look, the morality here, the issue of the equities of tax policy and what the Democrats would call the equality movement, his opportunity prospectively is to do, I think, to say what Tucker says in the sense of say, look, this is the system. This is why this organization is paying this rate of near zero. This is why this organization is paying substantially higher, because they don't have access to those various loopholes. The tax code is something that every American really, well, 90% of Americans will have experience of, and not good experience. So it's articulatable in a way that in these closing 4 weeks gives him, or 5 weeks, gives him that opportunity.
Well, I don't know if this is going to end up being sort of a boon or an opportunity for Trump, but I think it is a wash. I think it doesn't matter. If you're still with Trump, you're with Trump. The voters who are going to swing this election are Republicans who are terrified of Trump's temperament. That is the defining issue. Those voters are likely going to stay home and not support Hillary, in which case Trump can win. If they get over their loathing of Hillary and vote for her, she wins. Those are the people that say, wow, he made fun of someone collapsing in the street when she didn't feel well. That's not the temperament that I'm looking for. Wow, he says, watch a sex tape on tweet at 3 in the morning about a Miss Universe. That's not really the temperament I'm looking for in president. It's not about the taxes. It's really not. It's not about the fact that he has some racists in his crowd. It is always about whether or not he can keep it together as commander-in-chief.
By the way, before we leave the tax issue, Forbes reported back in 2014 that the New York Times paid no taxes and went into all the reasons why. There are many companies who don't, under the law, as Tucker says. GE was tagged with not paying. Okay, Tucker, let's turn to this next part, and this is the Clinton audio from a Clinton fundraiser talking about Bernie Sanders' supporters and what they were kind of promised.
I am occupying from the center left to the center right, and I don't have much company there. There is a sense of disappointment among young people about politics. And they're children of the Great Recession, and they are living in their parents' basement. And the idea that maybe, just maybe, you could be part of a political revolution is pretty appealing.
And basically she goes on to say that they were sold a bill of goods that wasn't practical.
There's been a lot of debate about who the real Hillary is, and I think we can be certain that when she speaks to donors, she's as real as she ever is. So I think this is what she really thinks.
But do you think she's center-left to center-right?
No, I think she probably is temperamentally. I know she has contempt for the left. I know she has contempt for the right, and that's part of her problem. I mean, a key part of governing is having empathy for the people over whom you rule, and she clearly has contempt for the losers in the globalization deal that we've had, both on the left and the right.
Does this do anything for her turnout? They're very concerned about millennials in the Clinton.
Well, and they ought to be. There's one group, you think your average rural white guy dislikes Hillary? No, only marginally more than your average Starbucks barista in Mendocino County with a face piercing. I mean, they just don't either. Neither group likes Hillary at all. And in this latter category, it's a big problem for her.
Have you seen a lot of face piercings with your baristas? No, I'm just kidding. How about just the millennial question?
Look, I think the headline was actually worse than the rhetoric. If you listen to what she said and the full remarks of what she said, there's actually nothing wrong there. She has a lot of empathy for the problems that millennials have faced. As usual with Hillary Clinton, she was a little inartful in how she put it, but I don't think this causes her any lasting damage. She has a lot more problems than this. If this is her worst day between now and Election Day, they are going to be very, very happy in Brooklyn. But it would be helpful for them if they didn't have to deal with headlines like this. The key for her, and this is why the debates are key, is giving the full Democratic base a reason to show up, because Hillary Clinton has more voters available to her than Donald Trump does. The question is, do they care enough to show up?
Two polls really quickly. 5 is about the four-way vote among independents. This has Trump, Tom, at 41%, Clinton at 29%, and there you see the third-party candidates, 21 and 3. And then number 7, the biggest motivation for voting for president, this kind of fits what AB was saying, fear other candidate wins, 57%, enthusiasm for the candidate, 39.
Right. I think this election, again, is about the mastery of discontent, in the sense of saying discontent towards the opposite, come to me, that you might not like me, but ultimately you have to be drawn to me because you detest the other candidate. And it's going to be that